Get this monkey away from my table. You people need to learn your place. Victoria Whitmore's manicured fingers gripped her wine glass as she stood up at the VIP table. Without hesitation, she dumped the entire contents of red Cabernet over Damon Richardson's head. The wine streamed down his face, soaking his expensive suit, dripping onto the white tablecloth like spilled blood. "Did you really think you belonged here?" She set the empty glass down with a sharp clink, her voice dripping with disdain. The Silicon Valley Charity Gala froze. Every conversation stopped. Phones lifted, cameras rolled. She had no idea she'd just destroyed her family's billion-dollar empire. The man sitting there, wine dripping from his chin, wasn't some gatecrasher. He was the one person on Earth who could obliterate everything the Whitmore family had built over 3 generations. Have you ever seen someone's racism cost them absolutely everything? Let's rewind 12 hours to understand how we got here. The Tech Innovation Charity Gala was Silicon Valley's most exclusive event of the year. $1,000 per plate, invitation only, where billion-dollar deals were made over champagne and caviar. The Fairmont Hotel's grand ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the kind of old money that built empires. Victoria Whitmore swept through the entrance like she owned the place, and in many ways, she did. Third-generation heiress to Whitmore Industries, one of America's largest defense contractors. Her family had been building weapons for the military since World War II. Her great-grandfather started with ammunition. Her grandfather expanded into aircraft. Her father conquered missile systems. Now it was her turn to carry the legacy. But there was a problem. Whitmore Industries was bleeding money. 3 major contracts had fallen through in the past year. The Pentagon was shifting toward newer, more innovative contractors. Companies that understood modern warfare, drone technology, cyber defense, the future of combat. James Whitmore, Victoria's husband and CEO, knew they needed a miracle. A massive new contract to keep the company afloat. Something worth at least $1 billion. Tomorrow's announcement could save us, James had whispered to Victoria in the car. The Defense Innovation Unit is finally revealing their next major contractor. If we get that UAV deal, we're set for the next decade. Victoria barely listened. She was more focused on making sure everyone at the gala knew exactly where she stood in the social hierarchy. As the evening progressed, Victoria's behavior became a masterclass in casual cruelty. She sent her champagne back twice, claiming the Latino server had dirty hands. She loudly questioned whether the black valet had actually graduated high school. When a young Asian woman tried to network with her, Victoria suggested she'd be better suited for the kitchen staff. Each comment was delivered with a smile that never reached her eyes. But Victoria's real target hadn't arrived yet. When Damon Richardson walked into the ballroom at 8:47 p.m., Victoria noticed him immediately. Not because he stood out, quite the opposite. He moved with quiet confidence, his tailored navy suit impeccable, his posture military straight. He looked like he belonged, and that infuriated her. "Who invited him?" Victoria whispered to her friend Margaret, a rail-thin socialite who collected charity board positions like designer handbags. Margaret shrugged. "No idea. Probably some diversity quota thing." Victoria watched Damon make his way through the crowd. People seemed to know him, shaking his hand with genuine respect. Business cards were exchanged. Conversations flowed naturally. He wasn't networking desperately like the climbers Victoria was used to dismissing. He was being courted. This was wrong. All wrong. "James," Victoria grabbed her husband's arm. "Do you know that man? The one by the silent auction table?" James squinted across the room. "Which one?" "The black one, in a navy suit. Someone needs to check his invitation. Victoria, please, not tonight. We can't afford any incidents." But Victoria had already made up her mind. Throughout dinner, she kept glancing at Damon's table. He was seated with 3 Pentagon officials and 2 tech executives she recognized from Forbes covers. The conversation looked serious, strategic, like they were discussing something important, something that should have included her family's company. "Excuse me," Victoria finally stood up, wine glass in hand. "I think there's been some kind of mistake with the seating arrangements." The room was about to learn exactly what Victoria Whitmore thought about black people who dared to sit at tables meant for their betters. What Victoria didn't know was that Damon Richardson had been taking notes all evening. Not just on her behavior, but on her character, her treatment of the staff, her casual cruelty toward anyone she deemed beneath her station. He'd been conducting an evaluation, and Victoria Whitmore was failing spectacularly. As she approached his table, wine glass raised like a weapon, Damon remained perfectly calm. He'd faced down enemy combatants in 3 different war zones. He'd negotiated with hostile governments. He'd been tested by prejudice his entire career. But he'd never met anyone quite like Victoria Whitmore. Someone so confident in her superiority that she was about to destroy her entire family's legacy with a single racist gesture. The question hanging in the air wasn't whether Victoria would follow through with her planned humiliation. The question was whether she had any idea who she was about to humiliate. Victoria's heels clicked against the marble floor as she approached the Pentagon official's table. Her wine glass caught the light, the red liquid swirling like a storm waiting to break. She'd been watching this scene unfold all evening, and now it was time to correct what she saw as a fundamental error. "Excuse me," she announced loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "I believe there's been some confusion with tonight's seating arrangements." The conversation stopped. 5 pairs of eyes looked up at her. 3 Pentagon officials, 2 tech executives, and Damon Richardson. The weight of their collective attention only fueled Victoria's confidence. "I'm Victoria Whitmore," she continued, as if her name should explain everything. "Whitmore Industries. We've been partners with the Department of Defense for over 70 years. My great-grandfather built the ammunition that won World War II. One of the Pentagon officials, a stern woman with silver hair and colonel's insignia, nodded politely. "Mrs. Whitmore, good to see you this evening." Victoria smiled, but her eyes remained fixed on Damon like a predator sizing up prey. "I couldn't help but notice that someone seemed to be sitting at the wrong table. The VIP section is typically reserved for actual defense contractors and military leadership, not," she paused dramatically, "charity cases." The air grew thick with tension. Phones discreetly emerged from purses and jacket pockets across the ballroom. Social media was always hungry for drama, especially when it involved Silicon Valley's elite behaving badly. Damon looked up calmly, his hands folded on the table. "I believe my invitation specified table 12. Is there a problem, ma'am?" "Your invitation?" Victoria's voice dripped with skepticism. "May I ask who sponsored your attendance tonight? Because I'm looking at this table and I see real military brass, real business leaders, and then—" She gestured vaguely at Damon. "You." "The Defense Innovation Unit extended the invitation," Damon replied simply, his tone remaining level despite the obvious provocation. Victoria's eyebrows raised. She knew the DIU. They were the Pentagon's new tech initiative, the group responsible for modernizing military technology. But that didn't explain why this man was sitting with the decision-makers instead of networking with the other diversity hires. "I see. And what company do you represent? Which government program put you here?" "I'm here in my capacity as—" "Let me guess," Victoria interrupted, her voice growing louder as nearby tables turned to watch. "Some diversity contractor trying to get a piece of the real player's pie? A community outreach program designed to make the Pentagon look more inclusive?" The tech executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the kind of networking conversation they'd expected at a charity gala. "Actually, ma'am, I'm here to evaluate potential partners for our next major defense initiative," Damon said quietly, his military bearing becoming more apparent as Victoria's attacks intensified. Victoria laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that carried across the ballroom like breaking glass. "Evaluate? You? That's absolutely rich. What exactly are your qualifications for evaluating anything in the defense sector? Did you take some kind of online course?" "Ma'am, perhaps we should return to our previous conversation," one of the Pentagon officials began, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this was heading. "No," Victoria cut him off with a wave of her manicured hand. "I think it's important that we address this directly. Too many unqualified people have been getting opportunities they haven't earned simply because of the color of their skin. It's not fair to companies like mine that have actually put in the work, that have actually earned our place at tables like this." A hush began to fall over the surrounding tables. Conversations slowed, then stopped entirely as people turned to watch what was clearly becoming a public spectacle. Margaret, Victoria's closest friend, appeared at her shoulder. "Victoria, darling, maybe we should—" "No, Margaret, someone needs to put this in perspective." Victoria's voice rose another octave, ensuring that even the tables across the ballroom could hear every word. "I've been watching him all evening, schmoozing with important people, acting like he belongs here, like he's earned the right to sit with actual decision-makers. Well, I have news for you." Damon stood up slowly, maintaining eye contact with Victoria. He was taller than she'd expected, his posture unmistakably military, his presence commanding in a way that should have given her pause. "Mrs. Whitmore, I think there may be some misunderstanding about—" "Don't you dare interrupt me!" Victoria snapped, pointing a finger at his chest. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to? My family has been serving this country since before you people even had the right to vote, before you people were allowed in the same buildings as real Americans." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Even Margaret gasped. "Victoria, please!" James Whitmore's voice carried from across the room as he began pushing through the crowd, having finally noticed his wife's public meltdown. "No, James, stay back. Someone needs to say what everyone else is thinking." Victoria grabbed her wine glass with both hands, raising it above her head like a weapon. "I'm tired of pretending that diversity quotas and affirmative action create actual qualifications. I'm tired of watching undeserving people take seats that belong to families like mine." Security guards began moving toward the table from multiple directions, but they were still 20 feet away, navigating through a crowd that had gathered to watch the spectacle. "Get this monkey away from my table," Victoria declared, her voice carrying across the now silent ballroom. "You people need to learn your place, and your place isn't here, pretending to be something you're not." The crystal glass tilted. Red wine cascaded over Damon's head in a perfect arc, soaking his hair, streaming down his face, staining his navy suit jacket. The liquid splashed onto the white tablecloth like spilled blood, creating an abstract pattern of humiliation. "Did you really think you belonged here?" Victoria set the empty glass down with a sharp clink, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Did you really think anyone was fooled by your little charade?" The ballroom had gone completely silent. Every conversation stopped. Every fork paused midway to every mouth. 300 of the most powerful people in America watched in stunned horror as Victoria Whitmore delivered what she believed to be the defining moment of her social standing. Damon Richardson stood there, wine dripping from his chin, and did something Victoria didn't expect. He smiled, not a bitter smile, not an angry smile, a knowing smile. The kind of smile you give someone who has just made a catastrophic mistake and doesn't realize it yet. "Interesting choice, Mrs. Whitmore," he said quietly, pulling a handkerchief from his jacket pocket. He dabbed at the wine with the same calm precision he might use to polish his shoes. "Very revealing." Security approached from two directions, but Damon held up a hand. "That won't be necessary, gentlemen. Mrs. Whitmore was just expressing her opinion about military contracting qualifications and racial hierarchies." "Sir, are you certain? We can escort her." "No need." Damon continued dabbing at the wine stains methodically. "I think Mrs. Whitmore has made her position quite clear. This has been very educational." Victoria basked in what she perceived as total victory. Around her, several society friends nodded approvingly. This was how you handled people who didn't know their place. This was how you maintained order. "I'm glad we could clear that up," Victoria announced to the room, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "Sometimes direct communication is the only way to address these awkward situations." But something was wrong. The Pentagon officials weren't applauding. They looked absolutely horrified. The tech executives were staring at Victoria like she'd just announced her plans to join a terrorist organization. And James Whitmore was pushing through the crowd with the expression of a man watching his house burn down. "Victoria?" James reached the table, his face completely pale. "What have you done?" "What needed to be done?" Victoria replied confidently, still riding high on her perceived triumph. "I made sure everyone understands the proper hierarchy here. I defended our family's reputation." James looked at Damon, who was still calmly cleaning wine from his jacket. "Sir, I am so incredibly sorry. My wife didn't mean—" "Your wife meant exactly what she said, Mr. Whitmore," Damon interrupted gently, folding his wine-stained handkerchief. "Character assessments are often most accurate when people believe there are no consequences for their actions." James's face went completely white. "Character assessments?" Damon straightened his tie and looked directly at James with the kind of measured authority that made hardened soldiers stand at attention. It's been an illuminating evening, Mr. Whitmore. I think we've learned everything we need to know about Whitmore Industries' corporate culture and leadership philosophy. He turned to leave, but paused at Victoria's shoulder. Some mistakes can't be undone, Mrs. Whitmore. I hope the wine was worth it. As Damon walked away with military precision, phones across the ballroom were already uploading videos to social media. #Winegate was about to trend worldwide. Victoria stood there triumphant and oblivious, having no idea that she'd just ended her family's 70-year defense contracting legacy with a single racist gesture. The question wasn't whether she'd crossed a line. The question was whether the Whitmore family would survive what came next. By 6 a.m. the next morning, Victoria Whitmore had become the most hated woman in America. The videos were everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Every platform was flooded with footage of her wine-pouring tantrum. The ##Winegate was trending #1 worldwide, ahead of a celebrity divorce and a natural disaster. But it wasn't just the incident itself that had people furious. It was Victoria's follow-up performance. Instead of apologizing, she doubled down, hard. Her Instagram post, uploaded at 2 a.m. while James begged her to delete it, read, "Sometimes you have to stand up for what's right. Real Americans shouldn't have to apologize for defending our values and our institutions. #Truth Matters, #Real Talk, #No Apologies." The comments section exploded. 30,000 responses in 4 hours, 90% of them calling for boycotts of Whitmore Industries. Screenshots of her post were being shared faster than wildfire, each one generating more outrage. Meanwhile, something strange was happening to Whitmore Industries' stock price. James stood in his home office at 7 a.m., watching the pre-market numbers with growing horror. Down 8%, down 12%. Down 15%. The algorithm traders were dumping Whitmore stock like it was radioactive waste. His phone buzzed with text messages from board members. Angry investors, panicked executives, everyone wanted to know the same thing. What the hell was Victoria thinking? But James didn't have an answer, because honestly, he had no idea who Damon Richardson actually was. "Get me everything you can find on that man from last night," James told his assistant. "Full background check, employment history, social media, everything." 3 hours later, the report came back, and it was virtually empty. Damon Richardson appeared to be a ghost. No LinkedIn profile, no Facebook account, no Twitter. The most sophisticated private investigation firm in Silicon Valley had found almost nothing about him beyond basic public records. Born in Detroit. I graduated from West Point. Military service. That was it. "This doesn't make sense," James muttered, staring at the 2-page report. "Nobody has this little digital footprint. Not in 2024. His assistant shifted nervously. "Sir, there might be a reason for that. People with classified clearances sometimes have scrubbed online presences. Military intelligence, CIA, NSA. James felt his stomach drop. "You think he's the government?" "I think," his assistant said carefully, "we should probably figure that out before your wife does any more interviews." But it was too late. Victoria was already on a local news show defending her actions with the kind of righteous indignation usually reserved for war crimes tribunals. "I stand by what I did," she told the news anchor, her chin raised defiantly. "That man was clearly out of place. Someone had to address the elephant in the room. These diversity programs are getting out of hand, and real Americans are tired of pretending otherwise." The interview went viral immediately, not in a good way. James's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he'd never seen before, but somehow knew was important. "Mr. Whitmore, this is Colonel Patricia Hayes, Pentagon Personnel Office. We need to schedule an urgent meeting regarding your defense contracts." James's blood turned to ice water. "What kind of meeting?" "The kind where you come to us, Mr. Whitmore. Today, 2 o'clock. "Can you tell me what this is regarding?" "Last night's incident involving General Richardson." The line went dead. James stared at his phone, replaying the conversation in his head. General Richardson. General. The man his wife had called a monkey and drenched in wine was a general. James tried calling Victoria, but she was still doing media appearances. Local news, podcasts, YouTube channels, anyone who would give her a platform to explain why she was actually the victim in this situation. She's completely lost her mind, James told his brother Michael, Whitmore Industries' chief operating officer. Do you understand what this means? If that man is really a general, if he has any influence over defense contracts? Michael's face was grim. I've been monitoring our accounts all morning. 3 major subcontractors have already called to reassess their partnerships with us. The Aurora Group canceled their meeting next week, and Boeing's procurement team wants to discuss alternative supply chain options. The ripple effects were spreading faster than either brother had anticipated. In the defense contracting world, reputation was everything. Contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars depended on trust, reliability, and character. Victoria had just demonstrated that Whitmore Industries possessed none of those qualities. By noon, the story had been picked up by CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC. Victoria's face was plastered across every major news website in America. The woman who had poured wine on a black man at a charity gala. What none of them knew yet was that the black man wasn't just anyone. He was the person who controlled $50 billion in annual defense spending. And at exactly 2 p.m., James Whitmore was about to learn that his wife had just committed corporate suicide in front of 300 witnesses. The question was no longer whether Whitmore Industries would recover from Victoria's racist outburst. The question was whether there would be Whitmore Industries left to recover. At exactly 2 p.m., James Whitmore walked into the Pentagon's most secure conference room and came face to face with his worst nightmare. The man sitting at the head of the table wore a perfectly pressed military uniform decorated with more stars than James could count. The same man who had wine dripping from his face 12 hours earlier was now clearly, unmistakably in complete control of this room. General Damon Richardson, United States Army. James felt the blood drain from his face as the pieces clicked into place, the calm composure under Victoria's attack. The military bearing, the way Pentagon officials had deferred to him at the gala. It all made horrible, devastating sense. "Please sit down, Mr. Whitmore," General Richardson said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to commanding thousands of soldiers. "We have quite a bit to discuss." James sat down heavily, his legs suddenly unable to support him. "General Richardson, I need you to know that my wife's behavior last night was completely unacceptable, racist, a perfect demonstration of your company's corporate culture." General Richardson folded his hands on the table. "I agree completely." The other people in the room introduced themselves. Colonel Patricia Hayes from Pentagon Personnel, Secretary of Defense Liaison Amanda Carter, and 2 officials from the Defense Innovation Unit. All of them had witnessed the previous night's spectacle either in person or through the viral videos. "Let me explain something to you, Mr. Whitmore," General Richardson began. "The Defense Innovation Unit doesn't just evaluate technical capabilities when selecting contractors. We evaluate character, leadership, the kind of people we're trusting with billions of taxpayer dollars and our soldiers' lives." James nodded desperately. "Of course, General. That makes perfect sense. Last night I was conducting what we call a cultural assessment of several potential partners for our next major UAV initiative. A $1.2 billion contract for autonomous drone systems." James's heart stopped. The UAV contract, the one that would save Whitmore Industries. General Richardson continued, his tone remaining perfectly professional. "Whitmore Industries was actually our top choice going into last night. Your technical specifications were impressive. Your pricing was competitive. Your track record with previous contracts was exemplary. Was, past tense. But character matters, Mr. Whitmore. When we're selecting partners, we need to know how they'll treat their employees, their subcontractors, their fellow Americans. We need to know what kind of values they represent." On the table in front of James, General Richardson placed a tablet showing Victoria's viral videos. The wine-pouring scene played on loop, followed by her morning news interviews where she doubled down on her racism. "Your wife called me a monkey, Mr. Whitmore, in front of 300 witnesses. Then she spent the morning on television defending those views." James wanted to disappear into the floor. "General, Victoria doesn't speak for the company. She has no official role in... She's the primary shareholder's wife. She represents your family's values. And based on what I witnessed, I have to assume those values extend to your corporate culture." Colonel Hayes leaned forward. "We've been reviewing your employment practices, Mr. Whitmore. The demographics of your leadership team, your diversity initiatives, or lack thereof. Secretary Carter opened a folder. In the past 5 years, Whitmore Industries has been involved in 3 discrimination lawsuits. 2 settled out of court. 1 found evidence of a hostile work environment for minority employees. James felt like he was drowning. Those cases were isolated incidents. We've made significant improvements. Have you? General Richardson's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath, because last night suggested otherwise. Now came the real revelation. General Richardson stood up and walked to a wall-mounted screen. Let me tell you who I am, Mr. Whitmore. I enlisted in the Army as a private 25 years ago, served 3 tours in Afghanistan, earned my commission in the field, rose through the ranks despite facing exactly the kind of treatment your wife demonstrated last night. Images flashed on the screen, a young Damon Richardson in basic training, combat photos from Afghanistan, awards ceremonies. Each image showed his progression from enlisted soldier to commissioned officer to general. I've been called every racial slur you can imagine by people who thought they were better than me, people who assumed I didn't belong, people who believed that the color of my skin determined my capabilities. James watched in growing horror as the presentation continued. I now oversee the Defense Innovation Unit's annual budget of $50 billion. I personally approve or reject every major technology contract the Pentagon awards, including the UAV initiative that would have saved your company. The room fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning. Every person who ever underestimated me because of my race gave me valuable information about their character. But your wife's performance last night was particularly educational. General Richardson returned to his seat. She didn't just reveal her own prejudices, she revealed what kind of environment Whitmore Industries cultivates, what kind of leadership you tolerate, what kind of values do you represent. James finally found his voice. General, please, you have to understand, Victoria was drinking. She was stressed about the company's financial situation. She's not normally— Mr. Whitmore, General Richardson interrupted. Alcohol doesn't create racism. It reveals it. Stress doesn't generate prejudice. It exposes what was already there. Colonel Hayes spoke up. The UAV contract has been awarded to Northrop Grumman. The decision was finalized this morning. James felt the world collapse around him. $1.2 billion. Gone. The contract that would have saved Whitmore Industries handed to their biggest competitor. Furthermore, Secretary Carter added, we're conducting a comprehensive review of all existing Whitmore Industries contracts. Any evidence of discriminatory practices or cultural problems will result in immediate termination. James realized he was witnessing the complete destruction of his family's 70-year legacy, all because his wife couldn't control her racism for one evening. There is one thing you can do, General Richardson said quietly. James looked up hopefully. Anything, please. Fire your wife. Remove her from any connection to Whitmore Industries. Implement comprehensive diversity training for your entire leadership team. Create a genuine cultural change program with external oversight, and issue a public apology that demonstrates actual understanding of why her behavior was wrong. James nodded frantically. Yes, absolutely. Whatever it takes. But understand this, Mr. Whitmore, even if you do everything I've suggested, it won't restore the UAV contract. That's gone forever. This is about whether Whitmore Industries has any future at all in defense contracting. As James left the Pentagon that afternoon, he understood that his wife hadn't just embarrassed herself at a charity gala. She had committed corporate homicide. The question now was whether he could save anything from the wreckage of Victoria's racist meltdown, and whether he was willing to choose his company over his wife. James Whitmore sat in his car outside the Pentagon for 20 minutes staring at his phone. Victoria had called him 17 times during his meeting. 17 missed calls from the woman who had just destroyed everything their family had built over 3 generations. When he finally drove home, he found Victoria in their living room surrounded by camera equipment and lighting rigs. She was giving another interview, this one to a right-wing podcast host who was treating her like a folk hero. What people don't understand, Victoria was saying into the microphone, is that I was standing up for American values, for merit over political correctness. Someone had to say what everyone else was thinking. James stood in the doorway, watching his wife dig their grave deeper with every word. My family has been defending this country for 70 years, Victoria continued. We've earned our place at those tables through blood, sweat, and sacrifice, not through diversity quotas or affirmative action programs. The podcast host nodded enthusiastically. So you have no regrets about your actions? None whatsoever. I'd do it again tomorrow. James turned off the recording equipment. Victoria, we need to talk. Now. James, perfect timing. I was just explaining to Marcus here about how— Get out! James's voice carried a fury that made the podcast host jump. Everyone out, now! The crew scrambled to pack their equipment, sensing the impending explosion. Victoria watched them leave with confusion. James, what's wrong? The interview was going perfectly. Do you want to know who you poured wine on last night? James's voice was deadly quiet. Some diversity hire who got above his station. I already told you. General Damon Richardson, head of the Defense Innovation Unit, the man who controls $50 billion in military contracts annually. Victoria's face went blank. What? The man you called a monkey. The man you humiliated in front of 300 witnesses. He's a general in the United States Army, Victoria, and he was evaluating us for the UAV contract. The color drained from Victoria's face. That's impossible. He was just sitting there like what? Like he belonged there? He did belong there, Victoria, more than you did, more than I did. He outranks every person in that room. Victoria sank into her chair as the full scope of her mistake began to dawn on her. The UAV contract, gone. $1.2 billion, awarded to Northrop Grumman this morning. But surely if we explain what? That my wife is a racist who attacks black generals at charity galas. That Whitmore Industries is run by people who think the color of someone's skin determines their worth? Victoria's shock was quickly replaced by defensive anger. I am not a racist. I was protecting our family's interests. By calling a decorated war hero a monkey? I didn't know he was— It shouldn't matter what he was, James exploded. You don't treat people like that regardless of their rank or position, but you're so blinded by your prejudice that you can't see past skin color. The argument was interrupted by James's phone buzzing. Emergency board meeting, called by Victoria's own father. Richard Whitmore, the company's founder and chairman, had seen the videos. 2 hours later, the Whitmore Industries boardroom was packed with the most powerful people in the defense contracting industry. Victoria's father sat at the head of the table, his face carved from stone. Victoria, Richard said quietly, explain to me what you were thinking. Victoria tried to summon her earlier confidence, but facing her father and the board felt different than facing podcast hosts and right-wing media. Daddy, I was defending our family's reputation. That man was clearly out of place. That man, interrupted board member Patricia Collins, was General Damon Richardson. I served under him in Afghanistan. He's one of the most respected officers in the military. Victoria's face went white. Another board member, former Secretary of Defense William Hayes, leaned forward. Do you have any idea what you've done to this company's reputation? We've already received calls from 15 major clients questioning their partnerships with us. This is a temporary setback, Victoria protested. Once people understand the full context. The full context, Richard Whitmore said slowly, is that my daughter publicly humiliated a black general while using racial slurs. The full context is that she's spent the last 18 hours defending her actions on national television. Collins opened a laptop. Let's review the evidence. The boardroom screen filled with social media posts. Victoria's Twitter account, her Instagram story, her morning news interviews. Each one showed her doubling down on her racist behavior, refusing to apologize, claiming she was the real victim. Victoria Whitmore stands by her actions. One news headline read, Billionaire's wife defends racial incident, read another. She called him an animal, Collins said flatly, on camera in front of Pentagon officials. Victoria tried one more defense. I was protecting American values. American values? Her father's voice was ice cold. Is racism an American value, Victoria? Is humiliating our military heroes an American value? The room fell silent. Then Collins spoke up. We've been contacted by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. They're opening an investigation into Whitmore Industries' workplace culture. Hayes added, the Pentagon has initiated a comprehensive review of all our existing contracts. Any evidence of discriminatory practices could result in immediate termination. Victoria's mother, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. Victoria, dear, you need to understand what you've done. You haven't just embarrassed yourself. You've destroyed 3 generations of work. I can fix this, Victoria said desperately. I'll apologize, It's too late for apologies, Richard said. The damage is done. The question now is how we save what's left of this company. Collins pulled up financial data. Stock price is down 32% since yesterday. We've lost 4 major subcontracts. Boeing is reassessing their partnership with us. Hayes continued the devastating news. Lockheed Martin canceled next week's negotiations. Raytheon is exploring alternative suppliers. Victoria's father stood up slowly. By the authority vested in me as chairman of this board, I am removing Victoria Whitmore from all positions within Whitmore Industries effective immediately. Daddy, you can't. I can and I am. Furthermore, her trust fund is frozen pending a full investigation of her actions and their impact on company assets. The other board members voted unanimously to support the decision. Victoria's mother continued. Your behavior has been a pattern, Victoria. We've ignored it for too long. The way you treat service workers, employees, anyone you consider beneath you. It stops now. Collins opened another file. We found additional incidents. A wrongful termination lawsuit from 2019 involving a black employee who claimed Victoria created a hostile work environment. She settled out of court for $200,000. More evidence emerged. Employee complaints that had been buried, discrimination allegations that had been quietly handled by HR, a pattern of racist behavior that went back years. The general didn't just see one incident, Hayes explained. He saw who you really are, and he made his decision accordingly. Victoria looked around the room desperately. These were people who had known her since childhood. Family, friends, business partners, all of them were staring at her like she was a stranger. Please, she whispered. This is my family's company, too. Richard Whitmore's voice was final. Your actions have shown that you don't understand what family means. You don't understand what honor means. You certainly don't understand what leadership means. James had remained silent through the entire meeting, but now he spoke up. I've filed for divorce. The papers will be served tomorrow. Victoria stared at her husband in shock. James? I won't let you destroy what's left of this company, or what's left of our reputation. As the board meeting ended, Victoria found herself completely alone, stripped of her position, her income, her trust fund, and her marriage, all because she couldn't control her racism for one evening. But the worst was yet to come, because while Victoria was being systematically dismantled by her own family, General Richardson was implementing changes that would affect the entire defense contracting industry. The question wasn't just whether Victoria would survive her downfall. The question was whether her actions would change how America chooses its military partners forever. 6 weeks later, Victoria Whitmore stood in front of a federal courthouse, reading from a prepared statement that her court-appointed lawyer had written. The woman who had once commanded respect at charity galas now looked hollow, defeated, wearing a discount suit from Target instead of designer couture. I want to publicly apologize to General Damon Richardson for my inexcusable behavior, she read, her voice barely audible over the crowd of protesters behind her. My actions were wrong, hurtful, and do not represent the values that America stands for. The words sounded hollow. Everyone could tell she was reading from a script, forced into this humiliation by her legal team's plea bargain agreement. The comments on the live stream were brutal but justified. Too little, too late. She's only sorry she got caught. This isn't remorse. This is damage control. General Richardson had been invited to respond, but he chose grace over revenge. Standing outside the Pentagon that same afternoon, he addressed the media with the same calm authority that had impressed Victoria's victims. Mrs. Whitmore's apology is noted, he said simply. But this case was never about personal grudges. It was about ensuring that our military partners share our values of respect, dignity, and equal treatment for all Americans. His response went viral for all the right reasons. Here was a man who had faced racism his entire career, who had been publicly humiliated, who could have demanded blood, and instead chose to focus on systemic change. The real reckoning was happening inside Whitmore Industries. James Whitmore had spent the last month implementing the most comprehensive cultural transformation in corporate history. Every employee underwent mandatory bias training. The entire leadership team was restructured. New policies were created with input from civil rights organizations. "We're not just changing policies," James announced to his remaining employees. "We're changing who we are as a company." The board had hired Dr. Maya Johnson, a renowned diversity consultant, to oversee the transformation. Her first report was damning. Whitmore Industries had a documented pattern of racial discrimination going back 15 years. Victoria's behavior wasn't an isolated incident. It was the visible symptom of a rotten corporate culture. But James was determined to rebuild from the ground up. Meanwhile, Victoria's personal reckoning was just beginning. The divorce proceedings had stripped her of everything. The prenuptial agreement she'd signed 20 years earlier, confident in her family's wealth, now ensured she left the marriage with almost nothing. James kept the house, the company shares, even their joint art collection. Victoria moved into a studio apartment in Oakland, working part-time at a non-profit organization as part of her court-mandated community service. 200 hours of serving meals to homeless people, many of them Black and Latino individuals she would have previously dismissed as undeserving. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. For the first time in her life, Victoria was forced to confront the humanity of people she'd spent decades dehumanizing. She served meals to a veteran who'd lost his leg in Afghanistan. She helped a single mother fill out job applications. She listened to stories of discrimination, poverty, and resilience that challenged everything she'd believed about merit and privilege. Slowly, painfully, something began to change in her worldview. But the real transformation was happening at the institutional level. General Richardson used Victoria's case as a catalyst for Defense Department reform. The Pentagon announced new character assessment protocols for all major contractors. Companies would now be evaluated not just on technical capabilities, but on their workplace culture, leadership values, and commitment to equality. Technical excellence means nothing if it comes wrapped in hatred, General Richardson explained to Congress. Our military fights for American values. Our contractors must embody those same values. The policy changes rippled through the entire defense industry. Companies began firing executives with histories of discrimination. Diversity initiatives stopped being cosmetic and became operational requirements. The old boys network that had dominated military contracting for decades suddenly found itself under unprecedented scrutiny. Victoria's racist outburst had accidentally triggered the most significant civil rights advancement in military contracting since the 1960s. Other government agencies began adopting similar protocols. The Department of Energy, Transportation, Education, Victoria's moment of unveiled hatred was becoming the foundation for systemic change across the federal government. Whitmore Industries, meanwhile, was slowly rebuilding its reputation. The company that had lost $2.8 billion in contracts was now being held up as a model for corporate transformation. James's willingness to choose principles over profit, to sacrifice his marriage for his company's soul, had earned grudging respect from industry leaders. "Sometimes you have to burn everything down to build something better," James told Forbes magazine in his first interview since the scandal. Victoria's actions forced us to confront truths we'd been avoiding for decades. The interview revealed that Whitmore Industries was now majority-minority owned. Its leadership team reflected America's diversity, and its workplace culture had become a benchmark for inclusion in the defense sector. Victoria's racist attack on a Black general had backfired so spectacularly that it actually advanced racial justice by decades. But for Victoria herself, the reckoning was far from over. As she served meals in Oakland, filed paperwork in San Francisco, and slowly began to understand the damage her privilege and prejudice had caused, one question haunted her. Was redemption possible for someone who had weaponized hatred so completely? The answer would determine not just her future, but the future of accountability in America. 1 year later, Victoria Whitmore stood in that same homeless shelter in Oakland, but everything had changed. She wasn't there for court-mandated community service anymore. She was there as a volunteer, arriving early and staying late, her hands rough from months of honest work. The designer manicures were gone. The entitled smirk had disappeared. Something fundamental had shifted in her soul. "Miss Victoria," called out Marcus, an elderly Black veteran she'd served meals to for months. You got those job applications ready for tomorrow's workshop? Victoria nodded, organizing paperwork with the same attention to detail she'd once reserved for charity gala seating charts. But now that precision served people who actually needed help, not people who wanted to be seen helping. The woman who had once called a black general a monkey now spent her days helping homeless veterans navigate the same bureaucracy that had failed them. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all Victoria herself. Meanwhile, the changes her racist outburst had triggered continued rippling through American society. General Richardson's character assessment protocols had been adopted by 17 federal agencies. Over 300 defense contractors had implemented comprehensive bias training. The defense industry had gone from 12% minority leadership to 38% in just 1 year. Whitmore Industries, now under James's transformed leadership, had won back several major contracts by becoming the most diverse and inclusive company in their sector. The company Victoria had nearly destroyed was now thriving specifically because they'd rejected everything she represented. Victoria's mother, Eleanor, visited the shelter one afternoon. She watched her daughter serve meals, organize job fairs, and treat every person with the dignity Victoria had spent decades denying them. "I'm proud of you," Eleanor said quietly as they walked to Victoria's beat-up Honda Civic. "Not proud of what you did, but proud of who you're becoming." Victoria looked back at the shelter. "I destroyed everything, Mom. Our family's reputation, the company, my marriage. I hurt so many people." "Yes, you did," Eleanor agreed. "But you also accidentally created something powerful. You forced America to confront its own prejudices. Sometimes change requires a catalyst, even an ugly one." Victoria had lost her fortune, her status, her marriage, and her old life. But in losing everything, she'd found something she'd never possessed: genuine purpose. The real measure of accountability isn't just punishment, it's transformation. Victoria's journey from racist billionaire's wife to dedicated social worker proved that even the most privileged, prejudiced person could change if they were willing to do the hard work of examining their own hatred. General Richardson, now promoted to 4-star general, had used Victoria's attack as a foundation for military reform that would protect future generations of soldiers from discrimination. Her moment of unveiled racism had accidentally advanced civil rights by decades. James Whitmore had rebuilt his company's culture from the ground up, proving that corporate America could choose values over profit and still succeed. Victoria herself had learned that true worth comes not from the color of your skin, your family's wealth, or your social status, but from how you treat other human beings when you think nobody important is watching. The question that started this story was simple. Have you ever seen someone's arrogance backfire so spectacularly that it changed the course of history itself? The answer is that sometimes the most powerful social justice comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the people who reveal society's deepest problems also become the catalyst for solving them. What would you do if you had General Richardson's authority? How would you use your power to create change? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of accountability and transformation inspired you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about justice, redemption, and the power of standing up for what's right. Because in the end, change happens when good people refuse to stay silent, and when bad people are forced to face the consequences of their choices. Thank you for reading.
At Black Voices Uncut, we don't polish away the pain or water down the message. We tell it like it is because the truth deserves nothing less. If today's story spoke to you, click like, join the conversation in the comments, and subscribe so you'll be here for the next Uncut Voice.
Who do you think you are staring at that contract? Your kind can barely read, let alone understand what $250 million means. Sterling Davis said it in Arabic, standing 3 feet from 12-year-old Imani Lewis, the housekeeper's daughter. He assumed she didn't understand. Before Imani could move, Sterling snatched the crystal vase from her hands and smashed it on the floor. Glass exploded everywhere. Imani stood frozen, surrounded by shattered crystal. Her wrist throbbed where he'd grabbed it. Harrison Taylor, the billionaire, looked up from his desk. A $250 million contract waited for his signature. He saw the mess, the 12-year-old standing in it. He laughed, responded in the same Arabic. "Don't blame the child. Animals can't help breaking things." Imani's head stayed down. Her hands trembled. She understood every single word. What happens in the next 4 minutes will leave them speechless. But first you need to see who this little girl really is. 6 hours earlier. Grace Lewis's alarm went off at 4:45 a.m., same as every morning for 12 years. She was 44. Her hands ached before she even got out of bed, the deep kind that comes from scrubbing, polishing, lifting, 12 years of making other people's lives spotless while her body broke down. She couldn't afford a doctor, couldn't afford a day off. The bus to Manhattan took 85 minutes, 2 transfers. Grace closed her eyes and prayed her arthritis wouldn't flare today, not when Mr. Taylor had important guests coming. She arrived at the penthouse at 6:30 a.m. sharp. Harrison Taylor's apartment took up the entire 42nd floor, marble everywhere. A single vase in the entryway cost more than Grace made in 6 months. She started in the kitchen, hand-polished copper pots that never got used, wiped the $8,000 espresso machine, scrubbed already spotless countertops until they gleamed. At 7:15, Harrison walked through on his phone. Talking about oil rights, $250 million. He passed Grace like she was furniture. Didn't say good morning. Never once asked her name in 12 years. At 8:45, Harrison stopped at the guest bathroom she'd just spent 45 minutes cleaning. "I smell something," he said, not to her, just out loud. Grace's stomach dropped. "Do it again." He walked away. Grace stood there, cleaning supplies in her raw hands. She'd done it perfectly. But she got back on her knees and started over, because she needed this job. Because her 12-year-old daughter needed to eat, needed school supplies, needed something better than this. So Grace scrubbed a spotless bathroom for the second time while Harrison made phone calls about his $250 million deal. Invisible. That's what she was. Imani arrived at 3 p.m. in her public school uniform, the kind with metal detectors and textbooks held together with tape. 2 buses. 85 minutes. She did AP English homework on the ride. 12 years old, reading at college level. Nobody cared. Her scholarship application to the private academy had been rejected last month. Family income $18,000 above poverty line, $60,000 below demonstrated need. She found her mother in the master bedroom changing yesterday's sheets. "Hey, baby," Grace whispered, like her voice might disturb something. Imani hugged her, felt how thin she'd gotten, how her hands trembled. "You okay, Mama? Important people coming later? We need to stay extra quiet, extra invisible." Imani nodded. She'd practiced invisible her whole life. She pulled out her backpack. Past crumpled homework and a broken calculator was her treasure. A leather-bound Arabic-English dictionary, gold-leafed edges worn to copper, cracked spine, pages soft as cloth. Her great-grandfather's dictionary, Sergeant Isaiah Lewis, Monuments Man, World War II hero who saved priceless artifacts across Europe. He died before Imani was born, but he left this. Every margin filled with his handwriting, notes in English and Arabic, how to spot forgeries, how to read truth in old documents. Imani had studied this since she was 8. She'd taught herself Arabic, not from expensive classes, from free YouTube videos, MIT OpenCourseWare, library books, this dictionary with her great-grandfather's notes guiding her like a ghost. At 12, she could read classical Arabic poetry, write formal correspondence, identify regional dialects. 3rd place in the regional competition last year, beat high schoolers, beat private school kids with tutors and study abroad. The judges were shocked. Nobody expected genius from a black girl in a public school uniform. She opened the dictionary. Her great-grandfather's faded blue ink stared back. "Truth has a quiet voice, Imani, but it's the loudest sound in a room full of lies." He'd written it like he knew she'd read this someday. She traced the words. Then she heard men's voices in the living room. Grace's eyes went wide. "They're early. We need to stay out of the way." Imani tucked the dictionary under her arm and followed. Invisible. The men arrived like a storm. Sterling Davis first. Silver hair, expensive suit that cost more than Grace's yearly rent. Smile practiced in a mirror. 2 other men followed. Same expensive clothes. Same shark smiles. Harrison greeted them warmly. Offered drinks. Grace appeared like a shadow with crystal glasses on a tray. $200 each. Sterling didn't glance at her when he took one, but he spoke loud enough for everyone. I'm surprised you let staff bring children to work, Harrison. Isn't that unprofessional? He stared right at Imani in the corner, clutching her dictionary. Harrison followed his gaze. His face tightened. Grace, I thought we discussed this. Grace went pale. Sir, her after-school program was canceled. I don't need the explanation. Just keep her quiet and out of sight. We have serious business. Sterling's associate laughed. Bringing a kid to a place like this. Some people don't understand professional boundaries. The other man smirked. Probably couldn't afford a babysitter. The words hit like slaps. Imani felt her mother's humiliation, saw Grace's shoulders hunch, watched her make herself smaller. Grace pulled Imani toward the kitchen, hand shaking. It's okay, Mama, Imani whispered. But it wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. And when the men started speaking Arabic an hour later, when they said things they thought nobody understood, Imani made a decision. Invisible was over. The meeting started at 4 p.m. Harrison sat at his mahogany table, Sterling Davis across from him, two other men flanking Sterling. Catherine Taylor poured coffee, the only person who ever thanked Grace. I'll leave you to your business, she said. Harrison barely looked at her. The moment she left, Sterling spoke. Shall we discuss in Arabic? My associates prefer it for sensitive matters. Harrison nodded. They switched languages seamlessly. Imani was across the room dusting the bookshelf, white earbuds in, looking like every 12-year-old ignoring adults. Her music wasn't playing. She was listening to everything. Sterling gestured at her, speaking rapid Arabic. Does the cleaning woman's child understand anything beyond basic English? Harrison glanced at Imani, laughed. Her? She probably thinks Arabic is a type of bread. Don't worry. The men chuckled. Sterling continued in Arabic, dripping contempt. Why do you allow these people in your home? The mother is barely competent. Bringing a child to business, disrespectful. One associate joined in. In my country, we wouldn't let someone like that touch valuables. Good for manual labor only. Harrison leaned back, comfortable. My wife has compassion, he said in Arabic, making it sound weak. She thinks I should be kind to staff, as if kindness means anything to people at their level. Sterling smiled coldly. They don't appreciate kindness. They only understand their place. He looked at Imani, still in Arabic. Look at her. Probably can't spell billion. Those cheap shoes, that ridiculous book she carries like treasure, as if reading will elevate her beyond what she is. He used a slur, crude and dehumanizing. All three men laughed. Imani's hand froze on the bookshelf, half a second, then continued dusting. Harrison spoke in Arabic. I pay her mother $18 an hour. Generous, considering no education. The child will clean houses, too. It's genetic. Some people are designed to serve. Sterling nodded. Natural order. My grandfather's help in Beirut knew their station. No delusions. The second associate leaned forward in Arabic. Does she even attend school? Or is the mother training her to scrub toilets? More laughter. Harrison's was loudest. Public school, he said in Arabic. The kind with metal detectors. She'll be pregnant by 16. They always are. Imani's grip went white on the duster, jaw clenched, but she didn't turn, just kept dusting the same spot. Sterling pulled out a cylindrical case from his briefcase. Enough about the help, he said in Arabic. Let me show you what will make us wealthy. He switched to English. Harrison, prepare to see history. Imani turned slightly. A document. Ancient-looking parchment. Arabic calligraphy. Something was wrong. Imani's hands shook, not from fear, from rage so hot it felt cold. She'd understood every word, every insult, every slur, every prediction treating her like livestock. Pregnant by 16, designed to serve, no delusions about rising. The words circled like vultures. She wanted to scream, to turn and respond in the same flawless Arabic they'd used to mock her, but she didn't. Her great-grandfather's words were louder. Truth has a quiet voice, Imani, but it's the loudest sound in a room full of lies. Wait for the right moment. She steadied her breathing, forced her hands still, then focused on Sterling's document. He was unrolling it carefully on the table. Yellowed parchment, elaborate Arabic calligraphy in dark ink, red wax seal at the bottom with an ornate crest. Sterling spoke in English now, voice smooth. This is the original land deed granted by your ancestors in 1680. Undisputed ownership of the Al-Noor Oasis and all mineral rights beneath. Harrison leaned forward, mesmerized. The oil reserves alone, Sterling continued, are conservatively worth $250 million. The other men nodded eagerly. Imani's eyes narrowed. She'd studied her great-grandfather's notes on historical documents since age 8. She knew authentic 17th-century Arabic calligraphy, how real seals aged, the difference between hand-scraped vellum and tea-stained modern paper. From across the room, she saw the mistakes. The paper was too uniform, no thin spots from scraping, the ink too black, sitting on the surface instead of eating into it like centuries-old iron gall ink should. And the seal was wrong. Her great-grandfather had written pages about seals. Forgers always missed one detail. Always. This seal had an eagle in the crest. It should be a falcon. Tiny detail. Devastating. These men were stealing $250 million with a forgery. And Imani Lewis, the 12-year-old who couldn't spell billion, was the only person who knew. She stood there invisible, holding her duster, making a choice. The meeting continued for another hour. Imani stayed invisible in the corner while Sterling's voice painted dreams of oil wealth, ancient family rights reclaimed, Harrison's legacy restored. Harrison leaned forward across the table, completely absorbed in every word Sterling spoke. At 5:15 p.m., the men took a break. Sterling and his associates stepped onto the balcony for expensive cigars. Harrison excused himself to his private study to take a phone call. Grace appeared silently, carrying trash bins. "Come help me, baby," she whispered. They moved through the apartment together, emptying waste bins from each room. When they reached Harrison's private study, Grace hesitated nervously at the doorway. "Quickly now," she said, "before he comes back." Imani lifted the heavy leather wastebasket near Harrison's desk. Shredded paper, long thin strips, Arabic text clearly visible on the fragments. Her heart started pounding. She glanced at the door. Still clear. Then she knelt down and started pulling out the shredded pieces, laying them on the expensive carpet like puzzle fragments. "Imani, what are you doing?" Grace's voice rose in panic. "We don't have time." "Just 1 second, Mama, please." The fragments were small, but Imani's eyes were sharp. Her great-grandfather had taught her how to reconstruct torn documents. Dubai Commercial Bank appeared on one strip, routing numbers that didn't match Sterling's business cards. Abu Dhabi Ministry of Energy letterhead with completely wrong address. She'd memorized the real one last year for a school project. Wire transfer authorization forms, dated 3 months ago, for different dollar amounts than today's discussion. This wasn't Sterling's first time. "Imani?" Grace hissed urgently. Footsteps in the hallway. Imani frantically shoved the fragments back into the trash. They hurried out just as Harrison's shadow appeared, but Imani had seen enough. At 6:30 p.m., Grace said they could finally go home. The men were having dinner. They took the service elevator down. In the lobby, Grace's phone buzzed. Catherine Taylor. Sterling's associates left a briefcase in the kitchen. "Can you bring it back up? They're returning at 8 p.m. to retrieve it." Grace sighed heavily, looked at Imani. "We have to go back up, baby." At 7:45 p.m., Grace and Imani returned to the penthouse. The apartment was quiet. Harrison and Catherine were in the dining room. Grace led Imani to the kitchen where the forgotten briefcase sat on the marble counter. "Wait here," Grace said. "I'll tell Mrs. Taylor we brought it up." She disappeared down the hallway. Imani stood alone. Then she heard voices. Men speaking Arabic. She froze completely. They weren't supposed to be back until 8 o'clock. But there they were in Harrison's study just off the kitchen. The door was cracked slightly open. Sterling's voice came through, low and confident. "Harrison's still at dinner with his wife. We have about 20 minutes. Imani's breath caught. She looked around frantically. No way out without passing directly by the study door. She spotted the supply closet. 3 silent steps. She slipped inside, pulling the door almost closed, leaving just a crack to see and hear through. Sterling and his 2 associates entered the study. They spoke rapid Arabic now, all English pretense abandoned. "Tomorrow at exactly 5 p.m., Sterling said in Arabic. "The wire transfer goes through. $250 million transferred directly to our Dubai account." The Lebanese associate laughed, full of contempt. "I still can't believe he fell for it so easily. The deed looks authentic to amateurs, but anyone with real expertise would immediately spot it as forgery." "Americans are so arrogant," Sterling replied smoothly in Arabic. "Especially wealthy ones. They think money buys intelligence. Harrison never questioned whether Al-Noor Oasis even exists where we claimed. Imani's eyes went wide. The second associate spoke. The brilliance is the land does exist, just 400 miles from where we showed him. Worthless desert, no oil, no water, nothing. By the time he sends people to verify, we're gone. And the fake ministry permits? The Lebanese man asked. Masterfully done, Sterling said with pride. Cost $50,000 to have them created in Cairo. The calligrapher was expensive but exceptionally talented. The seals look perfect. Not completely perfect, the second man corrected. Wrong crest, eagle instead of falcon. But Taylor won't notice. They all laughed. Sterling continued in Arabic. This is our 6th deal like this. London, Paris, Monaco. Wealthy idiots who think speaking some Arabic makes them experts. We've made over $800 million in 3 years. And tomorrow, the Lebanese associate said, raising his glass, we cross $1 billion. They clinked glasses. Imani pressed against the closet wall, hand over her mouth. Then Sterling said something chilling. What about the cleaning woman? The one with the child? Pause. What about her? She was here all afternoon. What if she overheard something? Tense silence. Then Sterling laughed dismissively. She's illiterate help, probably doesn't speak English well, definitely not Arabic. Stop worrying. The others agreed quickly. They finished drinks and left. Imani waited in darkness, shaking with fury. Grace found Imani 10 minutes later in the closet. What are you doing in here? Mama, we need to talk. On the bus ride home, the long 85-minute journey, Imani told her mother everything she'd overheard, every word, every detail. Grace's face went pale. No, absolutely not. We're not getting involved. Mama, they're stealing $250 million from a man who called you an animal today. Grace's voice cracked. Who makes me scrub clean bathrooms twice? You want to save him? It's not about him. It's about what's right. What's right? Tears filled Grace's eyes. Right is staying employed. Making trouble means losing everything. This job pays rent, food, school supplies. We're barely surviving. If Harrison fires us, and he will, we're homeless in 3 months. She gripped Imani's hands. Is that what you want? Imani looked at her mother's exhausted face, chapped hands, thin shoulders. Everything Grace said was true, but she thought about Sergeant Isaiah Lewis saving priceless art while bombs fell. He could have stayed safe. He chose truth instead. When they got home, Imani couldn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table with the library laptop, researching Sterling Davis until 2 in the morning. London Times, Le Monde, The National, investment fraud, fake land deals, always targeting wealthy men, always disappearing, always Arabic. 3 confirmed victims. $495 million in total losses. Tomorrow at 5 p.m., Harrison Taylor would become victim number 4. Imani stared at the screen, then made her decision. Tomorrow, Invisible would be over. The next morning, Imani woke at 5 a.m. with her mother. She had barely slept 3 hours. Sterling's Arabic confession kept replaying in her mind like a nightmare she couldn't escape. $1 billion, 6 victims across 3 continents, tomorrow at 5 p.m. exactly. Today was tomorrow. Grace looked at her across their tiny kitchen table. You're still thinking about it, aren't you? Mama, I know. Grace's voice carried resignation mixed with something that might have been pride. You're just like your great-grandfather, baby, so stubborn about the truth. She squeezed Imani's small hand tight. Promise me you'll be careful. We can't afford to lose this job. They took the early bus together, the long 85-minute ride through dark city streets. Arrived at the penthouse at 6:30 a.m. sharp. The apartment was quiet. Harrison still asleep. Catherine had already left for her morning yoga class. Grace headed to the kitchen to start breakfast. Imani stood in the hallway for a long moment, her great-grandfather's worn dictionary under her arm. Then she made her decision. She slipped into Harrison's study. The documents were spread across his desk, exactly where Sterling had left them. The yellowed parchment deed lay centered, looking ancient and official. Imani pulled out her phone, hands shaking. She photographed every page, the deed with elaborate Arabic calligraphy, the purchase contract, the wire transfer form Harrison would sign today at 5 p.m. Click, click, click. She opened her great-grandfather's dictionary to the calligraphy authentication section. His handwritten notes filled the margins in faded blue ink. She compared the seal on the deed to his sketches. There it was. The family crest showed an eagle with spread wings. The authentic Al Jamil seal, verified on the UAE National Archives website last night, featured a falcon in flight. Tiny difference. Most people would never notice. Devastating proof of forgery. She photographed the seal close, then pulled up the UAE ministry website and photographed the legitimate seal. Side-by-side differences became obvious. Wrong bird, wrong calligraphic style. Even the wax color was off, too bright red instead of aged burgundy. Footsteps in the hallway. Heart jumped. She shoved her phone in her pocket and grabbed her feather duster. Harrison walked past on his phone, talking about stock portfolios. Didn't glance inside. She waited until his footsteps faded, then pulled out her phone again, opened the translation app, started typing the Arabic text from the deed, using her great-grandfather's dictionary to verify every word. The translation revealed more problems. The date referenced a sultan who hadn't taken power until 15 years after the deed was supposedly signed. Geographic descriptions used modern city names that didn't exist in 1680. Legal terminology was completely wrong for that period. Beautiful, sophisticated, expensive forgery, still absolutely fake. Imani compiled everything on her phone. High-resolution photographs, side-by-side comparisons with legitimate sources, translations highlighting anachronisms, direct links to official UAE government websites. She glanced at the clock on Harrison's desk. 10:47 a.m. Wire transfer scheduled for 5 p.m. 6 hours and 13 minutes remained. At 2:30 p.m., Sterling Davis arrived with his 2 associates, all wearing expensive suits and confident smiles. Imani was dusting the living room bookshelf. Same spot as yesterday, invisible and ignored. The men greeted Harrison warmly, talked enthusiastically about how today would change everything forever. This partnership would make them wealthy beyond imagination. Catherine served imported coffee in delicate china cups. She caught Imani's eye across the room and gave her a small, kind smile. Imani didn't smile back. Her stomach was twisted into knots. At 4 p.m. exactly, they moved into Harrison's study for the final signing. Grace was in the kitchen preparing champagne and caviar for the celebration. Imani stood frozen in the hallway. Her phone felt impossibly heavy. All that evidence, all that proof. She was just a 12-year-old who cleaned houses. Who would believe her? The study door stood partially open. She could see Harrison at his desk, Sterling beside him with that practiced smile. The contract laid out perfectly. Her great-grandfather's words whispered, "Truth has a quiet voice, Imani, but it's the loudest sound in a room full of lies." The hallway clock read 4:52 p.m., 8 minutes until disaster. Imani took one deep breath, then walked toward the study, feather duster in one hand, dictionary in the other. 4:56 p.m. exactly. Imani stood just inside the study doorway, partially hidden in shadow. Nobody had noticed her enter yet. Harrison sat at his enormous desk, his gold-plated fountain pen positioned in his hand. The $250 million wire transfer authorization form lay directly before him. All it needed was his signature. Sterling leaned over Harrison's shoulder, one manicured finger pointing at the signature line. "Right here, my dear friend. Sign here and we both become part of history." The Lebanese associate stood against the bookshelf, barely containing his excitement. Catherine had joined them, standing by the window, wanting to witness this supposedly important moment in her husband's career. Imani's eyes moved around the room, looking for an opening. She saw it. The crystal vase on the shelf to her left. Same style as the one Sterling had smashed yesterday. Worth thousands. Her hand moved toward it slowly, to dust it. Her fingers touched cool crystal. Harrison's pen touched paper. And Imani Lewis, 12 years old, made the most important choice of her life. Her hand didn't just touch the vase, she pushed it deliberately. The vase tipped on the shelf, wobbled for one terrible second, then crashed violently to the marble floor. The explosion of shattering glass was deafening in the quiet study. Everyone froze instantly. Every head snapped toward the sound. Imani stood surrounded by shattered crystal, her hand still extended. For one long moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. Then Sterling Davis's face twisted with absolute rage. He started shouting, not in English, in furious Arabic. "You stupid little—" The words poured out unchecked. Your kind shouldn't even be allowed in civilized places like this. Look what you've done, you ignorant worthless. He used the same dehumanizing slur from yesterday, the one that made all the men laugh. He was so consumed with anger he completely forgot to pretend he was someone else. Harrison stared at the broken glass scattered everywhere, at Imani standing in the destruction. His face darkened with fury. "Grace!" he shouted toward the kitchen. "Get in here right now and control your daughter." Sterling kept going in rapid Arabic, voice rising higher. "This is exactly what I was talking about yesterday, Harrison. These people have absolutely no respect for anything, no intelligence whatsoever. Just look at her standing there like the dumb animal she is." Catherine started to speak. "Sterling, I think that's quite enough." But Imani's voice cut clearly through all the chaos. Crystal clear, perfectly calm, absolutely flawless, in formal classical Arabic. "Mr. Taylor," she said, her young voice as steady as ancient stone, "these men standing in your study are not your business partners. They are professional thieves. And that document on your desk is an expertly crafted forgery." The entire room went completely silent. Sterling's mouth literally fell open mid-sentence, his next word dying unspoken. Harrison's gold pen froze exactly 1 inch above the signature line. The Lebanese associate's face drained of all color instantly. Catherine's eyes went wide with shock and dawning comprehension. Imani stood calmly in the middle of broken crystal, still holding her great-grandfather's worn leather dictionary in both hands, looking directly into Harrison Taylor's stunned eyes. She switched smoothly to perfect English. "And I can prove every single word I just said." Nobody moved a muscle. Nobody drew a breath. The 12-year-old animal who supposedly couldn't even spell the word billion had just spoken absolutely perfect Arabic, and she was about to systematically destroy a $250 million international fraud scheme. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Then Harrison's face transformed from shock to rage. "What did you just say?" Sterling recovered first. Forced laugh. "A trick. She learned a few phrases. Don't be absurd, Harrison. She's a child. What could she possibly know?" He waved dismissively at Imani. "This is ridiculous." But Harrison was staring at Imani. Confusion, suspicion, and something else. Fear. Grace appeared breathless, saw the glass, saw Imani, went pale. "Mr. Taylor, I'm so sorry. Your daughter," Harrison said, eyes still on Imani, "just interrupted my meeting, in Arabic, claiming my contract is fraudulent." Grace's mouth opened. No sound. Sterling stepped between them. "This is clearly some kind of scam she's running. Maybe she's working with someone." "I'm not working with anyone," Imani said, still holding her dictionary, still in the glass. "Your deed is fake. The seal is wrong. The ink is wrong. Everything is wrong." Harrison's jaw clenched. "You're telling me my legal team, 3 Yale lawyers, missed what a 12-year-old cleaning girl spotted?" The way he said cleaning girl stung. Imani didn't flinch. "Yes, because they don't read Arabic, and they didn't check the details." Sterling's face reddened. "This is outrageous. Are you seriously going to let a servant's brat destroy the deal of a lifetime based on childish fantasy?" He turned to Imani, contemptuous. "What are you even doing here? You're supposed to be cleaning, not eavesdropping on conversations you couldn't possibly understand." "But I did understand," Imani said, calm, steady. "I understood yesterday when you called me an animal, said I'd be pregnant by 16, said people like me only know enough English to say, 'Yes, sir.'" The room went silent. Catherine's hand covered her mouth. Grace's eyes filled with tears. Harrison stared at Sterling. "You said what?" Sterling's smile faltered. We were speaking Arabic." "She couldn't have." "But I did," Imani said. "I understood every word, just like last night when you talked about your other victims, London, Paris, Monaco, 800 million in 3 years. Sterling went white. The Lebanese associate stepped toward the door. Harrison held up one hand. "Nobody moves." Ice in his voice. He looked at Imani. "You overheard a private conversation, in Arabic, and understood it." "Yes." "Impossible," Sterling said quickly. "She's making it up. She learned a few phrases online." "The seal has an eagle," Imani interrupted, sharp. "The real Al-Jamil seal has a falcon. The ink is modern carbon-based, not iron gall. No oxidation. And the date references Sultan Ahmad II, but he didn't take power until 1691. Your deed is dated 1680. She looked at Harrison. "That's an 11-year mistake. Your lawyers missed it because they don't read classical Arabic, but I do. Silence. Imani could hear her heartbeat. Harrison stared. At her, the deed, Sterling. How does a 12-year-old know about sultans and seals and iron gall ink? Imani held up the dictionary. My great-grandfather was Sergeant Isaiah Lewis, monuments man in World War II. He saved art and documents. He taught me how to authenticate artifacts. Everything he knew is in this book. She opened it, showed the handwritten notes, careful sketches. He spent 40 years studying forgeries. He taught me the best forgers always make one small mistake. Always. Harrison took the dictionary, stared at the pages, the meticulous notes in faded blue ink. Sterling moved toward the door. Nobody moves, Harrison repeated. Deadly calm. He looked at Sterling. Sit down. All of you. We're going through this document line by line. This is absurd. Sit down. Sterling sat. Sterling's mask cracked, but he tried rebuilding. He leaned forward, speaking rapid Arabic to Imani, low, threatening. Little girl, you're making a dangerous mistake. Your mother needs this job. Accidents happen on the subway. People fall onto tracks. Very tragic. Grace gasped. What did he say? Imani didn't answer. She stared at Sterling, then responded, in Arabic, but colloquial Lebanese dialect. Your accent is very good, Mr. Davis, almost perfect, but you made a mistake. You used kifak for how are you when you're supposedly from Abu Dhabi. In Emirati dialect, it's shlonak. Small difference. But it tells me you're not from the UAE at all. Sterling's eyes widened. She continued in Lebanese Arabic. Yesterday, describing the ministry documents, you said bi Tariq for properly. That's Egyptian, not Emirati. In the Emirates, they'd say by shakal sahi. The Lebanese associate stood suddenly. She knows. We need to leave. Now. Sit down. Sterling snapped. English now. Damage done. Imani switched to English, looking at Harrison. They're not from Abu Dhabi. He's Lebanese, Beirut accent. The second one is Egyptian. The third might be Emirati, but I doubt it. She pulled out her phone. Here's proof. She showed Harrison the photographs, the deed, the seal. Side by side with the real UAE ministry seal. Look at the crest, eagle versus falcon. Look at the calligraphy, Ottoman instead of Emirati. Look at the wax. Too bright. Modern polymer, not aged sealing wax. Harrison took her phone, zoomed in. His hands shook. Sterling stood. This is ridiculous. A child with a phone. The date, Imani said. Louder now, stronger. Check the date against when Sultan Ahmad II took power. Check the geographical descriptions against historical maps. Check the terminology against period legal documents. She looked at Harrison. Or just call the UAE Ministry of Interior. Ask them to verify the seal. They'll tell you it's fake in 30 seconds. Catherine spoke from the window. Harrison, call them, right now. Harrison stared at the photos, at the deed, at Sterling. Sterling's face was gray. You were going to steal $250 million from me, Harrison said slowly, using a fake document, in a language you assumed I couldn't verify. Harrison, how many others? The Lebanese associate bolted for the door. Grace screamed. Catherine moved faster, blocked the door. Nobody leaves, she said firmly. Harrison, call security. Call the police. Harrison reached for his phone. Sterling lunged across the desk for the wire transfer form. Imani snatched it first, held it against her chest, protected by her great-grandfather's dictionary, while Sterling's hand stopped inches from her face. Harrison's voice cut through like thunder. Touch her, and I'll have you arrested for assault of a minor on top of fraud. Sterling froze, slowly backed away, eyes fixed on Imani with pure hatred. She stared back, unblinking, 12 years old, surrounded by broken glass, holding a $250 million contract and a dead man's dictionary. For the first time in her life, Imani Lewis was not invisible. Harrison stood at his desk, phone in hand, face pale. I need to verify something. Catherine, get me Professor Omar Wilson at Georgetown, Arabic Studies. Catherine pulled out her phone. He's a friend. I'll call. Sterling stood. Harrison, this is unnecessary. Sit down. Sterling sat. Catherine spoke into her phone. Omar? Catherine Taylor, I need a favor. Can you look at a historical document right now? Pause. Yes, urgent. Harrison's about to wire $250 million based on it. She listened. Perfect. I'll set up video. 2 minutes later, the television screen flickered to life. Professor Omar Wilson appeared. Elderly, white hair, kind eyes. Behind him, bookshelves filled with ancient volumes. "Harrison, Catherine, this must be urgent." "Omar," Harrison said, voice strained, "I need you to look at an Arabic deed from 1680. Tell me if it's authentic." "Of course. Show me." Harrison held his phone over the deed. Catherine positioned her laptop so the professor could see high resolution. Zoomed in as he directed. Professor Wilson studied silently. The calligraphy, the seal, the text. Finally, he spoke. "Where did you acquire this? Is it authentic?" The professor sighed. "No, I'm afraid not." Sterling stood. "That's ridiculous." "Be quiet," Harrison said without looking. Professor Wilson continued lecturer's tone. "The calligraphy is beautiful, masterful, but wrong. This is Ottoman-influenced Diwani script, not what would have been used for official Emirati family documents in 1680. He gestured. "Zoom in on the seal." Catherine adjusted. "There, the crest. That's an eagle. The Al-Jamil seal has always featured a falcon. Significant error." He leaned closer. "And the ink. Modern carbon-based. Real iron gall ink from that period would show oxidation, burning into paper, creating halos around letters. This ink just sits on the surface." Imani listened, heart pounding. Everything her great-grandfather taught. This professor confirmed it all. "But the most obvious error is in the text itself. Show me the date section." Catherine moved the camera. "Yes, there. This deed references Sultan Ahmad II. But Ahmad didn't ascend until 1691. This document is dated 1680, 11-year anachronism." He paused, looking at the camera. "Whoever created this was skilled, very skilled. But they made critical mistakes any expert would spot immediately." Harrison's face went gray. "Who spotted it, Omar? Who brought this to your attention?" Harrison turned slowly to Imani. She stood in broken glass, holding her great-grandfather's dictionary. "Her," Harrison said, voice barely audible. "A 12-year-old girl." Professor Wilson's eyebrows rose. "May I speak with her?" Harrison nodded. Imani walked through the glass to stand before the camera. "Hello," she said quietly. "Hello, young lady. What's your name?" "Imani Lewis." "How did you learn to authenticate Arabic historical documents, Imani?" She held up the dictionary. "My great-grandfather, Sergeant Isaiah Lewis, monuments man during World War II. He taught me." Professor Wilson's expression changed. Recognition, respect. "Isaiah Lewis. I know that name. His work on Abbasid-era manuscript authentication is still cited in academic papers." He smiled. "You have an extraordinary legacy, and clearly you've learned his lessons well." Harrison stood very still, staring at Imani like seeing her for the first time. "How long have you been able to read Arabic?" "Since I was 8. "You taught yourself?" "Yes. My great-grandfather's dictionary, free MIT courses, YouTube videos, library books." Harrison's voice was hollow. "Yesterday, when we spoke, you understood every word." "Every word," Imani confirmed. Catherine spoke. "Omar, how advanced is her understanding?" Professor Wilson looked thoughtful. "Based on her ability to identify Ottoman versus Emirati calligraphic conventions, distinguish between iron gall and carbon inks, recognize Sultanate chronology errors, and understand colloquial dialectical variations." He paused. "This young woman has graduate-level expertise in Arabic historical linguistics." He leaned forward. "Imani, have you competed in Arabic language competitions? Regional competition last year, 3rd place. Against high school students?" "Yes, sir." "Remarkable." He shook his head. "Harrison, this young woman just saved you from catastrophic financial loss." He looked at Sterling. "And whoever sold it to you knew exactly what they were doing." Harrison turned to Sterling, voice ice. "How many others?" Sterling said nothing. "I'm calling the FBI Financial Crimes Unit, my lawyers, the SEC." Sterling stood. So did his associates. "Going somewhere?" The door opened. 2 security guards entered. "These 3 men don't leave the building. Police are coming." Sterling's face twisted with rage. He looked at Imani. "You stupid—" "That's enough," Catherine said sharply, stepped between Sterling and Imani. "You'll speak to lawyers and the FBI, not to her." Harrison walked to Imani, looked down at this tiny 12-year-old in broken crystal holding a worn dictionary. "You saved me, my company, my reputation, everything." Imani didn't smile, didn't nod, just looked at him. And Harrison Taylor saw himself reflected in a child's eyes, saw exactly what he was. "I'm sorry," he said, voice cracking. "For yesterday, for today, For 12 years, I treated you and your mother like you were invisible, like you were less than human. Grace stood in the doorway, tears streaming. Harrison looked at her. Mrs. Lewis, I've been a blind, arrogant fool. Your daughter just demonstrated more intelligence, courage, and integrity than I've seen in my entire career. He turned to Imani. Where did you apply for scholarships? Carleton Academy. I was rejected. You're not rejected anymore. I'm calling the headmaster tonight. Full scholarship. The best Arabic tutors money can buy. Study abroad wherever you want. Imani's eyes widened. And your mother, Harrison turned to Grace, I'd like to offer you a position. Not as housekeeper, as curator of my art collection. Salary, benefits, pension, starting Monday. Grace's hand covered her mouth. Couldn't speak. Professor Wilson's voice came from the screen. Imani, may I add something? She looked at the camera. Consider Georgetown when you're ready for university. Full scholarship. I'll make sure of it. The Arabic Studies Department would be honored to have Sergeant Isaiah Lewis's great-granddaughter. Sirens wailed outside, getting closer. Harrison looked at the wire transfer form in Imani's hand. May I have that back? She handed it to him. He ripped it in half, then in half again, and again. The pieces fell like snow around the broken glass. The NYPD arrived 6 minutes later. 2 detectives from the Financial Crimes Unit. A man and a woman, both in plain clothes, badges on their belts. The lead detective was a woman named Sarah Moore. She looked at the scene. 3 men in expensive suits surrounded by security guards, a billionaire holding pieces of a torn contract, a 12-year-old black girl standing in broken glass. Someone want to explain what's happening here? Harrison spoke first. These men attempted to defraud me of $250 million using a forged historical document. That girl, he pointed to Imani, she's the one who exposed them. Detective Moore's eyebrows rose. She looked at Imani. You? Imani nodded. How? I read Arabic. The document they tried to sell Mr. Taylor is a fake. Wrong seal, wrong ink, wrong dates. Detective Moore pulled out a notepad. Your name? Imani Lewis. Age? 12. The detective wrote that down, looked at Sterling. And you are? Sterling Davis. This is absurd. The child is making accusations based on expert analysis. Professor Wilson's voice came from the screen. He was still on the video call. I'm Professor Omar Wilson, Georgetown University Arabic Studies. I've just verified that the document in question is indeed a sophisticated forgery. The young lady's assessment is entirely correct. Detective Moore looked at the screen, then at Sterling. Mr. Davis, I'm going to need you to come with us for questioning. Sterling's face went dark red. On what grounds? Attempted wire fraud. If what I'm hearing is true, we're talking about $250 million. The second detective stepped forward. Mr. Taylor, we'll need to see the document. And any communications you've had with these men? Of course. Harrison handed over his phone. Everything is there. Emails, text messages, the forged deed. Detective Moore turned to Imani. And you. I'm going to need a full statement. Can your mother be present? I'm right here, Grace said from the doorway. Good. We'll need to hear exactly what you overheard and how you identified the forgery. Catherine spoke up. Detective, Professor Wilson can provide expert testimony as well. And we have video of his analysis. Excellent. Detective Moore looked at Sterling and his associates. Gentlemen, you're coming with us. We have some questions. Sterling didn't move. I want my lawyer. You can call from the station. As the detectives led Sterling and his associates out, news crews were already gathering in the lobby downstairs. Someone had tipped them off, probably building security. By the time the elevator reached the ground floor, cameras were flashing. Mr. Davis, is it true you attempted to defraud Harrison Taylor? Did a child really expose your scam? How many other victims are there? Sterling said nothing, head down, being led to a police car. Upstairs, Harrison stood at his window watching the scene below. They're going to want to talk to you too, Detective Moore told Imani. Not tonight, but soon. This is going to be a big case. She looked at Imani with something like respect. You did good, kid. Really good. After the police left, the apartment fell quiet. Harrison, Catherine, Grace, Imani, and Professor Wilson still on the screen. This is going to be national news, Catherine said softly. Maybe international. Harrison nodded. Imani, the media is going to want to talk to you. You don't have to if you don't want to. Imani looked at her mother. Grace squeezed her hand. It's your choice, baby. Imani thought for a moment, then nodded. I'll talk to them, if it helps catch other people doing this. Professor Wilson smiled from the screen. Spoken like a true scholar. Truth above comfort. After Professor Wilson disconnected, the apartment felt suddenly too quiet. Harrison stood in the middle of his study, surrounded by broken glass, by the evidence of his own arrogance. I need to say something, he started. His voice was rough. To both of you. Grace and Imani stood together, waiting. I grew up poor, Harrison said. Detroit. My father worked in a factory. My mother cleaned houses, just like you. He looked at Grace. I clawed my way out. Scholarships, student loans, 100-hour work weeks. I built this company from nothing. He paused. And somewhere along the way, I forgot where I came from. I forgot what it felt like to be invisible, to be dismissed because of where you lived or how much money you had. His voice cracked. I became the thing I hated, the kind of man who looks down on people doing honest work, who treats intelligence like it's something you can buy. He looked at Imani. You're 12 years old. You taught yourself a language most adults can't master. You authenticated a historical document that fooled my lawyers. You exposed an international fraud ring. He shook his head. And yesterday, I called you an animal. The word hung in the air like poison. I can't take that back, Harrison said. I can't erase 12 years of treating your mother like she didn't exist. Can't erase yesterday or today. He took a deep breath. But I can do better going forward, starting now. He turned to Grace. The curator position is real, not charity. I have 200 artifacts in this apartment alone. Most haven't been properly cataloged in years. I need someone I can trust, someone with integrity. He looked at her directly. $60,000 a year to start. Full benefits, pension. Your daughter can visit the collection anytime. Use it for her studies. Grace's eyes filled with tears. Mr. Taylor, Harrison, he said, please. Just Harrison. He turned to Imani. And you. Carleton Academy is just the beginning. Whatever you need, tutors, books, travel, university, all of it. No strings attached. He paused. I'm not trying to buy forgiveness. I don't deserve that. I'm trying to invest in someone who's already proven she's extraordinary. Catherine walked over and put her hand on Harrison's shoulder. We both are. Imani, you'll always have a place here, not as staff, as family. Grace couldn't hold back anymore. She started crying, really crying. Imani hugged her mother tight. Harrison stood there watching them. This woman who'd cleaned his home for 12 years. This child who'd saved his entire company. And he finally understood what he'd been too blind to see before. Value isn't about money or position or power. It's about character, courage, truth. And the greatest treasures are often the ones you almost throw away. 9 months later. Imani Lewis stood at the front of her 8th grade classroom at Carleton Academy. The private school she'd been rejected from a year ago. Now she was their star student. She wore the Navy uniform proudly. On her desk sat her great-grandfather's dictionary. The teachers let her keep it there. They understood what it meant. After school, she took the subway to Harrison's office. Not to clean, to work. She'd helped catalog 143 artifacts in his collection so far. Found 2 more forgeries. Both times Harrison had called the original sellers and demanded refunds. Her mother met her there. Grace had an office now, with her name on the door. Grace Lewis, chief curator. She managed a team of 5 people. All of them called her Miss Lewis with genuine respect. Harrison had changed too, not completely. He was still demanding, still driven, but different. He'd implemented something he called the Hidden Talent Initiative. Every employee in his company, from executives to maintenance staff, filled out a skills inventory. What languages do you speak? What degrees do you have? What can you do that we don't know about? The results shocked him. His head of security had a PhD in mathematics. His night janitor was a former civil engineer from Syria. His receptionist spoke 5 languages fluently. Harrison promoted 11 people in the first month, created new positions for 6 others, started paying for continuing education for anyone who wanted it. The business press called it revolutionary. Harrison called it embarrassingly overdue. He'd been interviewed on CNN, Bloomberg, NPR. Every time he told Imani's story, gave her credit, used his platform to talk about wasted potential and invisible genius. We're walking past brilliance every single day, he'd said on 60 Minutes. We just don't bother to look. The segment had gone viral, 12 million views. Imani's story became a case study at Harvard Business School, a TED Talk, a documentary in production. But for Imani, the best part was simpler. She wasn't invisible anymore. Neither was her mother. Imani graduated from Carleton Academy 4 years later. Valedictorian. Full scholarship to Georgetown waiting. Professor Wilson walked her through campus on her first visit. Showed her the Arabic Studies building, the library, the classrooms where she'd spend the next 4 years. Your great-grandfather would be proud, he told her. I hope so, she said. She kept his dictionary with her always, added her own notes in the margins now, in English and Arabic, continuing his work. On the first page, she'd written something new. Words for anyone who might read it someday. Genius doesn't announce itself. It waits quietly in corners, cleaning floors, riding buses, hoping someone will finally look. The question isn't whether brilliant people exist around you. They do. The question is, are you paying attention? Who are you walking past every single day? Who have you dismissed because of their job, their clothes, their age, their accent? Who could change your life or save it if you just stopped and listened? The dictionary sat open on her dorm room desk, waiting for the next person who needed to learn its lessons, waiting to be heard.
You just witnessed the gap between power and responsibility. At Beat Stories, we close that gap, one story at a time. Subscribe and help hold systems, leaders, and gatekeepers accountable.